of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast, where we dive deep into the media industry headlines and dissect the digital disruption that diverges the masses into the new media counterculture and away from the media establishment. Here is the king of podcasts. I took a quick look back at some of the episodes during the start of the pandemic here on the Broadcasters Podcast, about 15 months ago. And I went back to April of 2020, and I looked back at one of the episodes I talked about where the future of the movieplex. Episode 116, if you want to go and take a look at it for yourself, about what was going to happen as all the things were resulting and where the pendulum swinging was going on when it came to the traditional exhibition movie theater experience versus streaming movies. And now the correction has now come into play. Took about 16 months, but we are now here. And now it has happened. So to see that actually happening now as we are working our way out of the pandemic and seeing that people are going back to the movies once again, as you would hope, with attendance coming back, movies making money once again, and not having to just go and rely to go and put it out in a movie theater or put it out simultaneous to a movie theater and on a TV screen. We're still getting that this year, but it's changing. And we can see that's going on right now because of what's happening with everything that's going on with movies. Let's talk about it because that's the focus of tonight's program, episode 182 here on the Broadcasters Podcast. Thanks for being here. I'm King of Podcasts, and it's time for us to go and go through how the summer movies are making their way back, which I am so thankful for because I'm now able to make the most out of my subscription to Regal Movies and the Regal Unlimited plan and going to the movies on a regular basis every Friday night. That's back into play, which is wonderful. It's nice to go and start seeing movies. I can go back to back to back, and I can go every weekend. So this time around, I finally get the chance. Except for 1 week in the last month, I've gotten to go to 3 movies. Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. I saw Fast 9, which I would have seen the week before. I saw it last weekend. And then this weekend, I get to go see Black Widow. So we're getting somewhere. Wonderful. That is one of the best things that could be going on. So one of the things I just noticed right now, Black Widow is releasing in theaters this weekend, and it will debut in over 4,000 screens. 4,160 theaters, domestic. And that's been a long time since that happened, to have that many theaters available to go and do this. Plus, the Marvel movie is going to be available with Premier Access on Disney+. I'll pay $30 to watch at home or go watch it in the theaters, which I think a lot of people are going to go to the theaters to go watch. But I really think that's what's going to happen. Plus, we had Space Jam that also came out this past weekend, and there's much more. So the movies are coming out big. Looking at the weekend chart, tells you how big we're doing right now when movies coming back. Fast Saga, $116 million total so far in 2 weeks, including my money. Boss Baby, $16 million gross for its first week. Forever Purge, only making $12 million. But again, 3 movies like that, back to back to back, making what? $50 million. Your top 3 movies. We're starting to see, double-digit millions in these movies once again, and seeing a big change and seeing a lot of screens available because those first 3 movies right there, 4,200 screens for F9, 3,600 for Boss Baby, 30,000 for Forever Purge. Movies are back. They have made their way back. It is a wonderful thing. And lots of movies that are making some money. Quiet Place still 6 weeks and it's 144 million. And I haven't even looked at what things are looking like domestic with some of these movies. F9 has already broken $500 million. It's on its way. Just a matter of time. And that is a wonderful thing. So it's nice to see all this coming back once again. Wonderful. So what we can tell you right now, according to the latest ComScore information, they are telling us now that 90% of movie theaters are now open worldwide. So movies are back, and the movie theaters are back. And if you go, it just works out. So ComScore They said that 90% of movie theater locations are now open globally for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic began. And it coincides with the launch of summer blockbuster season, feeling optimism for the movies industry as exhibitors focus on providing a safe movie-going experience. Films such as Universal's F9 have generated over $500 million worldwide. Paramount's A Quiet Place Part 2, Disney's Cruella, Warner Brothers' The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, Sony's Peter Rabbit 2, The Runaway, Lionsgate's The Hitman's Wife Bodyguard. Over $1.3 billion in global box office revenue and climbing. The money is raking in again. It's not all the way where it was before, but it's promising because people are coming back. And my movie theater is back to where it was. It's not completely there. The concessions are still a little bit light. But people are really much, not too worried about having to wear masks in the theaters now. Here in Florida where I'm at, the masks are almost non-existent now. We're about 95% of people that are just, they feel like they're vaccinated, they're fine, and they're doing it. Even for me, I'm a little bit iffy on still throwing a mask on or having it on me anyway, just because it's just kind of like having to wean out the habit. Because it was a long time having the habit. But for the most part, I feel fine about it. I mean, it doesn't make a big difference. But that's what people want when they get the concerts coming back. People want to be able to go back out, go to see an event in close proximity, as it was before, masked, and everybody feels safe. Everybody feels healthy, which is good. Now, we're going to look at what the movie theaters are doing right now from a couple different angles. The financial end is another place to go and look and see what's going on, which is good. But before I do that, I want to talk about back to April 2020, what I mentioned just before. There was a time where movie theaters thought they were going to have big trouble with low attendance because a survey at the time that I was talking about this back in episode 116, I mentioned how 44% of respondents said they would go to fewer larger public events after the period of social distancing is over. 38% saying they would attend, but about the same number. 18% say they would attend more movies. 47%, rather importantly, said the idea of going to a major public event will scare me for a long time. Well, it all depends on how people felt like at the time. And that's what's going on there. But doesn't feel like that's going to be the case anymore. I think people, once we got past it, felt okay. And that is just a matter of where I talked about with journalism, how the media, mainstream media, was just scaring the crap out of people. And people are still scared. And you're playing towards people's emotions. Anger, fear, frustration, anxiety, causing depression. Well, people were smart enough to get out of that. And that's what's most important. So our media can be consumed not in the convenience of our own home, just where it has to be, because we're now going to see the reaction, as I report tonight, that people are kind of rejecting the idea. And all the money being made right now, or all the money that's trying to be made because of the new clutter of streaming services, has changed everything overall. Now, into the mix here, current day. The movie industry is rebounding. It was already retreating well before COVID-19. This is from James Brumley at The Motley Fool. So now the steps to go ahead and take things back to normal. This is back in June 11th, as he reports this. And he mentioned that the shareholder of theater chains are excited. The film screening business was already struggling before the pandemic. Any recovery now is ultimately going to be capped by that long-standing downtrend. But the explosion of new and revamped streaming services since just last year will only make that rebound only much more challenging. Movie theater investors want to keep their expectations in check. Now, movies have been increasingly struggling to attract viewers. So going into this, they say that the number of movie tickets sold in the United States had been steadily peaking since peaking at $1.57 billion back in 2002. Adjusting for inflation, that's also when the U.S. industry's U.S. revenue peaked at $14.4 billion. And going back to 2019, we were under, for the industry, roughly $12 billion. And then it dropped to under $2 million overall in 2020. So now, I mean, the way things are looking right now, there's a chance for, and you're seeing, they already talking about the fact that the theater business could get themselves with ticket sales They already got $1.3 billion already on ticket sales so far, just on some of those movies we just mentioned before. There's a good chance that they could get themselves back up to, say, $8 to $10 million by end of year, which is at least a direction back where it should be back to normalcy. Because the lowest it has been was under $12 million several times. It got under to $11 million in 2017. So to actually reach $11 million, the way things are going with the amount of movies we have left to come out, because all the big blockbusters are coming out now, well, there's a chance for the movie theater to come back. Plus, remember, the influx of movies are going to be coming back next year. And the clutter, because there's going to be a lot of new movies coming out that all are catching up that need to be released as quickly as possible in 2022 that is going to really bolster the box office. We've talked about how many movies are coming out, how many are left to go and slate. There will be 3 to 4 wide screen releases coming up again. It'll be as if the movie theater industry went through a strike. It's the same kind of delay that all these movies had to get pulled back and did not get pushed out. Now they're going to get pushed out. And let's see how well you do, because also with inflation, there might be a lot of ticket items that people might want to do on the weekends that are going to be pretty expensive. But the movie theater still overall is going to be an experience that already has this peak as to how much everything costs. So I already know what my cost is anyway, but if you do it right, use reward points, you use a subscription program like I do, you can make the theater experience pretty good if you're just 1 or 2 people. If you can make it where people are just individually paying for themselves, but if you're doing it for a family, it's going to be tougher. But the prices can't go much higher for theaters overall. Maybe a couple extra bucks when it comes to individual tickets, but I think everything else will probably stay where it is because it's already at a high rate in the first place. On purpose, of course. The overseas markets facing also a similar struggle. They've combated the headwind in the most obvious ways, offering more theater screens and raising ticket prices. So average movie screen price now is above $9, $9.25 it looks like now. And also the amount of movie screens available is over 40,000 these days. The country's annualized domestic box office take has held steady at around $11 billion on a per-screen basis. Annual revenue has fallen dramatically from more than $400,000 in 2002 to less than $300,000 every year since 2016, and fewer seats have been sold. So the cost of installing, maintaining, cleaning each seat doesn't decline, even though that seat's capacity to generate revenue is shrinking. Costs are only inching upward, exacerbating the headwind as the slump in concession sales, stemming from the shrinking number of moviegoers. I don't know if this goes for everybody else, but at least for my movie theater, it's starting to pick itself back up. But then also remember, with some of the meme stocks and stuff and AMC Entertainment, their operating income and cash flow were deteriorating, but they did get some help from the stock market and all the meme stock stuff that was going on from that. Movie theaters may be on the verge of coming out of a pandemic-prompted slump, but they're rebounding into an environment that's pretty lethargic. They're competing now with Disney+, AT&T's, Warner Media, streaming service HBO Max, which have not been shy about debuting theater-caliber films direct to subscribers. But, my friend, we already know HBO Max and Warner Brothers, they're not going to be pushing out movies simultaneous. They're going to take that away, bring back the theatrical window, which is going to be happening for all the movies coming up ahead. So take some of that streaming thought out of the equation, because that instantaneous release will be taken away. It might not be that long. It might be 30 days. It might be 45 days. But there's still enough room to say that a movie that will get out in the theaters for 5 to 6 weeks and then go to streaming, which people will be fine with that. If there's a little bit of a lull behind, that doesn't make a big difference. Now, in the end of the story, they talk about how conspicuously absent from these optimistic outlooks, an unclear idea of how the industry can reverse the contraction that was already in place well before the worldwide coronavirus outbreak. Whatever rebound is in the works isn't going to get very far if nothing else has changed, particularly in light of streaming media's massive growth since early 2020. Well, my friend here, James Brumley, I'm going to debunk your thought process here. Like I said, you're going to see what's going on and what changes are being made. A Deadline story just came out this week that is kind of debunking the whole idea. take into account for the movie industry, could streaming lead to the rebirth of the theatrical experience? So they talk about, for a big movie that illustrates how the coronavirus pandemic has rewired the film business, consider Army of the Dead. It was released in May. The Zack Snyder zombie action spectacle cost $90 million to make. Initially set up at Warner Brothers, it traveled a winding path to Netflix, which grabbed it in 2019 and was dramatically ramping up its film output. Unlike other prominent titles that the streamer released before the pandemic, this movie snagged a one-week exclusive run from Cinemark, the number 3 U.S. exhibitor. It was the widest theatrical opening of any streaming movie to date, and came just as turnstiles were starting to spin again. Spring releases had cracked the $100 million mark, and while capacity constraints were still putting limits on possibilities, the movie business felt more like itself since the COVID nightmare began in early 2020. Now, Army of the Dead opened to just $780,000 in just 600 theaters. Mixed to positive reviews and strong social media buzz. The gross was about half of what industry pundits projected and was undercut by the audience knowing it could wait a week to stream it. About 72 million subscribers would do just that over its first month, making it one of the most watched films ever on Netflix. Ticket sales amounted to coins between the sofa cushions for Netflix, which is far more focused on adding subscribers than negotiating theatrical splits or orchestrating thousands of playdates. Now, the Cinemark CEO, Mark Zoradi, who's a former Disney executive, mentions that there was a notable reversal on the impasse of The Irishman in 2019. Because of theater owners' reluctance to depart from the standard 90-day window, the movie that Martin Scorsese directed did not secure buy-in from any major exhibitors. If that were today, they would find an agreement. That was very important to Scorsese to get a theatrical release. I think Netflix actually wanted a theatrical release as well because it really helps to set up and eventize that movie. What does an eventize movie look like in the New World, though? It's a very unsettled question. Now, we just talked about the North American box office, just making the same point I made before. It's hardly a given, but the playing field is less level than ever. In addition to streamers' increased leverage, major studios' decision to emulate them with direct-to-streaming or day-and-date patterns could create a self-perpetuating cycle. So, shortening the windows for these movie theaters. From the time, just like we had video, direct-to-video, a movie theater gets it for so many weeks, exclusive, and then it moves over. Well, if windows do shorten more permanently, according to a senior Netflix executive told Deadline, the one thing that means is that the theaters are going to need more films. Zoradi and other top exhibitors acknowledge as much and have been in talks to book more pure streaming fare. Now, the next movie for Scorsese is Killers of the Flower Moon, and it's aiming for a bigger splash in megaplexes than The Irishman when Apple rolls it out in 2022. It's set up to have a theatrical release. Robert De Niro, one of the stars, said, "We're still working out the details." And given the firepower of streaming players like Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV Plus, and Netflix, there could be a movie a week at least capable of playing wide, at least according to traditional measures. But the leverage has practically reversed from the dynamic in 2019. At that point, theaters were dug in and figured Netflix and others would need access to their screens. Now, after theaters survived brushes with bankruptcy, and the kind of existential questions they'd never faced before, there's a greater urgency to secure product. So you put the theaters up against the wall, they learn. That's amazing. It's really amazing the resiliency of these companies after all this happened. You got to say that too. Because a lot of movie theaters could have shut down as a all this result, but the fact is, a lot of them have come back. So all the uncertainty has upended compensation for gross players and thrown a monkey wrench into the business model of films. How will the waterfall of revenue from ancillaries be calculated and shared if the theatrical engine at the front of the train is actually powered by a battery instead of a coal boiler? I'm not worried about the metaphor right there. But what is happening is this. We know that besides the TV shows that are being put together for content and the movies that are being created for the sole purpose of the streaming services as exclusive movies, but in some cases, they still want to have a theatrical release. Some of these Netflix movies, they want to get the buzz of a theatrical release then when it goes to streaming, as opposed to it only going to streaming. Because a theatrical release creates an exclusivity. It creates a moment, like I said, eventizing. making it an event and saying, oh, I missed it in the theater, but it's going to be on Netflix next week. Point of mind, it's just a big, huge promotional tool. Same idea as when you see a big premiere. It's the same idea. It's you're creating a premiere in every city, in every movie theater for a particular movie that will go to streaming because you're getting the buzz. It's like, oh, people are talking about it. People want to see it. You're getting the buzz. You're getting to hear about it. Early initial response, and then people will go ahead and look for it. And really look for it. I mean, that's the idea. So they talk to some agents and some other people. And the word is about the fact that how film purveyors and theater chains have been battling over the theatrical windows, the time between how long the movie is going to be in the theater to when it goes on to DVD or on demand or premium video on demand through the streamers. Because remember, the streamers, except for a Netflix or others, or Apple TV, which is going to be, that movie is going to be exclusive, embedded into the price. Unlike an HBO Max, or an HBO Max does the same thing, but a Disney Plus will charge. Amazon Prime will charge. Things like that, for the most part. Filmmakers and stars betting on themselves to take less upfront, only to reap rich benefits and success, are being tempted to get their fair market value. For every Joker, which brought windfalls of tens of millions of dollars to director Todd Phillips and star Joaquin Phoenix, there are lost opportunities that a streaming service would have locked in at a market rate. So it's also for the movies. The fact that it's going to get to the theaters, there's more money to the star and to the people around it. So we know Netflix, as a result of all this, they, added as many customers in the first half of 2020 as in all 2019. During the theater closures, licensing to streaming ended up being a viable business alternative for suddenly revenue-deprived studios. Dozens of small films, large and small, Coming to America, Trial of Chicago 7, Greyhound, Finch, they were all offloaded to streaming over the last year. In most cases, the figures are vague. For instance, Borat's subsequent movie film, Amazon reported last fall, was enjoyed by tens of millions of Prime members during its opening weekend. Warner Brothers is perhaps the biggest unknown among the traditional studios because of their decision to pull all 2021 films out on HBO Max. Jason Kilar, the CEO of Warner Media, may not be a change in the direction of artistic freedom and belief of theaters. Discovery is about to take the reins of a merged entity with Warner Media, and if it gets regulatory approval, we don't know what's going to happen with that. There's a passion for the movie business in the Discovery CEO, David Zaslav. So he might want to go ahead and offer the traditional movie window just like before, and not just go ahead and swallow up movies that go to HBO Max right away at the same time. The companies have forecast $3 billion in merger-related synergies, more than the amount of the AT&T Time Warner deal that saw about 2,000 people leave Warner Media, including a number of seasoned executives. One thing that isn't changing is the appetite for streaming players to disrupt the movie business like they did television. Amazon, even before they bought MGM, was aiming for broader hits. They also got Will Smith's Anton Fuqua collaboration called Emancipation, and paid a record-setting $25 million for Sundance acquisition CODA. The shelves are filling at streaming companies at the same time when Disney is sending a number of movie titles to Disney Plus, while Warner has said that half of its 2022 slate will go to HBO Max. So compared to 2021, half the movies are going to go out to the theaters and half will be exclusive to HBO Max. So we'll know which movies that go to theatrical, they're going to be the best ones. The ones that they know they're bankable box office. That's the other reason for the movie theaters to do so well. Because now you know the streamers and the movie theater companies, or the movie studios, they realize, they're going to be able to put certain movies that are mid-level, B-level, tier-level movies onto the streamers to satiate those subscribers. But if they're going to put some real money behind themselves, they want to make sure they make some big bucks, they have to put their biggest movies on the big screen. So the quality of the movies going to the theaters is going to get better. Do you realize what that's going on here? That means we get better quality movies that are going to probably be, at the least, they're going to be movies that you're going to get more support from the movie studios because they are banking and gambling on the fact they're going to make big money unless they flop. But I think what's going to happen as a result in 2022, with all these things that are going on here, according to the story, the movie theaters are going to get less flops. We're going to get better movies coming up now. And at the moment, we're getting pretty good movies as we get it, which is pretty good. Netflix kicked off 2021 with a trailer promoting the plan to deliver at least one major movie a week to subscribers. And they're doing it right now. But Netflix needs to continue to go ahead and build up. But are they able to continue to build their subscriber base? And we already talked about some of the issues that were going on where, Wall Street already wants to put pressure on Netflix to push more into what they're doing with, maybe even putting ad support to their product or having to do something to raise the price of their subscriptions. Things like that you have to consider. But now let's go into the doom and gloom side of some of the stories that are being talked about with both movie theaters and streaming services. One of the bigger names, who is retired, by the way, he's no longer active, Barry Diller, former Paramount and Fox CEO, he took a big quote into a story that when he talked to The Wrap, saying the movie business is over. He did a new interview with NPR, the Sun Valley Conference in Idaho. He said the rise of streamers and corporate conglomerates have drastically altered the movie industry, urging to create movies that will have lasting, sustaining cultural value is finished. Okay, so I get where he's coming from here. What he's trying to say is that what's going to happen now as a result of the movies, we're going to start seeing more movies that are going to be bankable. So the cultural, for your consideration, Oscar-friendly, Golden Globe-friendly side of the movie theater business is going to suffer. Okay. It might not always be that. I think that's going to be part of the recovery process. If you want culturally, beneficial, great storylines, great stories, I get that part because of the fact that, but what we also know that what's happening is there's a lot of changes going on within the Oscars and the Hollywood Foreign Press and all the Movie Theater Academy, the Academy of Motion Pictures. A lot of things are changing right now. And, at this moment, it's going to be tough to go ahead and put the movies are going to be put out because they need to be following a certain criteria of diversity, equity, and inclusion within who's making the movies to who's featured in the movies. It's not a great thing, but I have to say that what's going to happen here is that you're talking about movies that are going to go to the movie theaters that are going to be bankable. They're going to make a lot of money. Now, of course, the quality of those movies, in some cases, they're not going to be, something that's going to be critically acclaimed. But the movies that might be critically acclaimed, that's going to be tough to push out there. But this year coming up, 2022, it's going to be where we're going to have that. But what's going to happen now is that I think once all these movies that were on the back burner that finally get pushed out, take about a year or so, you're going to have that dead period between after Christmas up until Easter. That dead period is going to come back again. Next year, it's going to be not even noticeable because the dead period that would normally be between Christmas and Easter is going to be jam-packed with all these movies that were held over, that had to get holed up and held back, did not go to streaming, did not negotiate to go somewhere else. They said, no, we're going to just push the date as far as we can up front. And then next year is going to be a monster year for movies. 2023, we'll probably get back into a normal lull because then things are going to go back to that. And remember, when that happens, once the movie theaters recover and make a good amount of money and get themselves back to a normal spot in 2022, next year, following year, they're not going to have those movies to go ahead and have that kind of inventory available for widescreen releases, I would imagine. Because then you're going to start picking up on the movies that just started to get produced and put together and filmed during post-pandemic periods. That will make a change as well. And then the room for all those movies, because then you're going to have a lot of screens that are available for all your Oscar-nominated films. Prior to having the Oscars, they're going to have all those movies available to go in and watch after that. So that method will happen. But until everything is figured out about who's going to be, when you see the Grammys changing up, who's going to be determining what movies become critically acclaimed or become nominated or become the winners on either the Oscars or the Hollywood Foreign Press or whatever, that's all going to change because we already see the shuffling because of this whole push for systemic inequities, right? And now that whole change is going to happen. And that doesn't really respond to the mass public because that is a move by mainstream culture. The counterculture, okay, the crossover culture, they're not going to respond so much to all the Oscar-nominated, critically acclaimed kind of content. I don't think so right now. There will be some movies, again, that will cross over. But how well they'll cross over, if they actually have a good, sustaining storyline and a story that really resonates with people, that is really interesting, that's one thing. But if you're going to try to create some kind of movie that's going to be trying to force some kind of narrative down people's throats, not so much. And we see that some movies that try to get put to a certain narrative just do not perform well. Same thing with television. Same thing goes. It's what happens. We just look at what people respond to, what they watch. Are they really going to be taking something that might have a political, social, cultural narrative? Probably not. Some people will, but you still got to make good quality movies. And if some movies do so well and then they push them back out, and they go to a widescreen release and they just do really well, then that's great. And some movies will get the chance to go and do that. And that would be a good thing. If we start getting some good movies that get widescreen release and they're Oscar nominated and the Oscar winners are really good and they get out there and get pushed. Diller argued about the definition of movies. We're back to Barry Diller here. Of movies itself is in such flux that it, quote, it doesn't mean anything right now, end quote. Then he took a swipe at streaming services, bemoaning how many original streaming titles get big numbers but seem to be virtually forgotten and buried after the debut. Correct. Quote, these streaming services have been making something that they call movies. They ain't movies. There's some weird algorithmic process that has created things that last 100 minutes or so. Then he added a Quibi, the now defunct streaming platform founded by Jeffrey Katzenberg, was just a bad idea in terms of why its brief 10-minute shows failed to gain any attraction. Quote, it was a bad idea that had no testing ground other than a big-scale investment. Otherwise, it would have slithered around for a while, but it was such a big-scale thing that it lived and died in a millisecond. It has no relevance on anything. The idea of professional, A-quality 10 minutes or less stuff just made no sense. He says he has almost zero interest now in the movie business as it stands today and would prefer to continue to turn his attention to Broadway plays. He definitely doesn't feel he feels some animosity. He's not afraid to talk about it because he's out of the business. He doesn't have to worry about it. Now, what about the streaming services themselves? Let's go ahead and transition to where they are in the conversation because they're hitting their plateau. Believe it or not. CNBC puts out a story that honeymoon's over for streaming services. Here's where the major players stand. Now, Comcast's NBC Universal, Viacom CBS, AT&T's Warner Media, Discovery are among the companies launching streaming video services during the pandemic. So this past year, which we talked about all of them here on the program. Just go ahead and look back on previous episodes. Fueled by hundreds of millions of people at home, streaming video was one of the big winners of the pandemic, which subscription service usage surged. Americans spent 44% more time streaming video in the fourth quarter of 2020 than it did to a year earlier, according to research firm Conviva. So the streaming wars are here. They're here now. Media and technology companies will need to show investors they can grow streaming subscribers when everyone isn't stuck inside. So let's look at individuals. And remember, these are companies that have spent so much money getting themselves together to get content to continue to foster the growth of subscribers. Let's go to the top. Netflix right now, 208 million paying subscribers right now. 74.4 million in the U.S. and Canada alone. That's amazing. They're the gold standards of transparency. They're paying subscribers for U.S. Canada region, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, Latin America, and Asia Pacific. They don't take advertising revenue, so it doesn't need to disclose finances related to commercials. Disney Plus, 103 million subscribers. They also own Hulu, which is 37.8 million subscribers for their streaming video on demand. And then their live TV service, if you add them, 3.8 million and 13.8 million for ESPN Plus. Warner Media's HBO and HBO Max, 63 million global subscribers, 44.2 million in the U.S. Now, they're trying to talk about how the numbers that they're doing well with right now are their RPU, their average revenue per user. So how much they're making per user per month. It's not that much when you think about it for them. $14 for Netflix, they're making on average from every subscriber. For Disney Plus, $3.99. Hulu, $12. For Hulu Live TV, which is more like a cable service, is $81 per user. For HBO and HBO Max, $11.52 per month per user. This is great for subscribers. This is great for the consumers. But we already know, and the writing's on the wall, all these streaming companies, if they can't get more subscribers, which their shareholders and these big corporate companies are going to be doing, they're going to have to raise prices. They're going to add advertising. They're going to start doing things that we're not going to like. And then we're going to start weeding out which streaming services people want. Like we said, it will kind of take away the idea where people are going to be completely cutting the cable. They might not completely do it yet, or they're just going to settle with a number of streaming services that'll be a certain price point that they're willing to go ahead and budget out. That's what's going to happen. Amazon Prime Video, more than 200 million global Prime subscribers, 175 million of which stream shows and movies in the past year. The Prime membership is $12.99 a month or $119 per year. But Amazon plays a different game than the streaming services because they're more worried about how, the video content's there, but it's part of more of Amazon itself. Because most Prime members are probably not subscribers for the video service, but more subscribe for free and fast shipping on Amazon packages, Whole Foods discounts, and other benefits. That's where, so they're multifaceted. That's where they work out. NBC Universal's Peacock, 42 million U.S. signups. So some people are getting either a free service or paying between $5 and $10 per user. So public estimated probably right now $6 to $7 a month. It's not much. Now, Disney or HBO Max, they also have the subscriber base from their cable services. And NBC has from their cable and network. Same thing for Disney from cable and network and what they have. So they have other revenue sources, but remember, they all made the change. They took and they decided to shuffle around and lay off thousands upon thousands of people because they were gambling on the fact that streaming was the place to go. That's the next revenue model that needs to happen. So their priority is streaming. And now they're all learning the lesson on how tough it's going to be to make that happen. Viacom CBS has 36 million global subscribers. They got Paramount Plus, they got Showtime, Noggin, BET Plus, and others. 50 million global Pluto TV monthly average users. They're not paying a thing. Okay. Now, Pluto advertising revenue is passing $1 billion in 2022, so that gets something for them as well. We don't know what their average per user is right now, but Paramount Plus gets a certain amount, but still, they're kind of in a spot where they're trying to find, throughout all their products, trying to find a certain amount of money. How are they going to go ahead and increase revenue, or if they increase advertising? Stars almost 30 million global subscribers, 60.7 million are streaming, and they're averaging $6 a month per user. Discovery, 15 million subscribers, 13 million Discovery Plus subscribers, which, of course, we're knowing that the merger with Warner Media is going to change all that up. Apple TV, we don't know how many global subscribers they have. No clue. Nothing's been revealed. And remember, Apple actually gave away Apple TV Plus subscriptions for free for a year and extended free trials. So we don't know how many people are actually paying $4.99 for the service right now. But again, they have other things that are supplementing themselves. But when you look at the amount of money they're making per user, when they were actually getting more per user, having them buy through cable, or with the advertising they were putting in front of them, it's going to be the balancing act of trying to make that work, trying to get the amount of money that we're making. And for these companies, these big corporations, what they want to be able to do is say, hey, look, we made the change and we were right about it, that the gamble we made worked. But this is, of course, the digital disruption and the understanding of how these corporations don't always get where they're doing right now, making the changes that they're making. They're not sure of what they're doing yet. And how do I know that? Well, there's another story came out from AP that talks about this. Media consumers may be reaching the limit of streaming services. A British research company discovered a magic number for American media consumers. It's 7. They're willing to buy paid or free or subscribe to 7 streaming services. That's it. Before the hassle of keeping track of logins and passwords just becomes too much. And this is based on the London-based media consultancy OMDIA. And they've been monitoring the average of streaming services and the number of streaming services that are online homes. And it was from 5 to 7.23 on average last November in the United States. But now it's dropped to about 7 subscription services per household. That's what we're looking at right now. Rua Aguete, who is senior research director with OMDIA, says, quote, it's not that people want to watch less, but people don't like to keep so many streaming services and logins. If true, and that's how many consumers would draw the line at 7, it has enormous business implications, increasing the importance of aggregators or services where people can seamlessly collect their services and make it harder for new companies to get into the business. Because then these streaming services are going to have to consolidate. Because they're not all going to do like I do, where I can get all of them on Amazon, on the Amazon Fire Stick or a Roku, right? And then that's a boost to the established companies, where Netflix is the biggest paid streaming service, with 57% of online households in the U.S. subscribing to it. Then you got Amazon Prime, Hulu, Disney Plus, and HBO Max, the other leaders. And YouTube is among the top free services. So these big media companies have to figure out, what are they going to do? Because they're not getting the kind of audience they get to watch the advertising on their cable network offerings. We're seeing right now, when I look at in the same story, they talk about how ABC's primetime lineup of shows averaged 3.1 million viewers. That's horrible. CBS 2.9 million, NBC 2.7 million, Fox 2 million, Univision 1.3, Ion Television 980, Telemundo 910. You add that together. I mean, that's incredible. What is that? Network TV total, 13 million viewers. We're not even counting CW. 13 million viewers total. When we just talked about how the hundreds of millions of subscribers, they're all on streaming. That's the biggest point. Then you look at what's going on with the cable channels, just at the top channels. TNT is the largest right now, 2.13 million viewers. Fox News, 2.12 million. ESPN, 2.1. MSNBC, 1.3. HGTV, 1.18. Among those right there, just the top 5, you only got less than 10 million. Now we know they're going to get more in some other channels, but that's really just nickel and diming our way through. You put that together right there. That's still, 25, maybe 30 million viewers, being a little bit generous. And that's not enough. That's not even coming close to the lowest end of the streaming services that are out there. So that limited audience to catch on and watch television on a regular basis, watch the advertising that they have out there, which they probably do better with advertising than they would do doing with subscription services, and the amount of money they're paying, where they're only charging $5 to $10. Meanwhile, they could be getting much more benefit by having advertising on their screens instead of the streaming services. Watching on the conventional cable or network route as opposed to streaming. And because the habit of not having advertising on streaming really does make a big difference. Now, YouTube, even though it's free, we do see advertising. We're accustomed to it. Pluto TV, we're accustomed to it as well. Same thing goes. Really incredible, but not good overall. But there is some growth potential for the streaming players coming up in 2021. So the benefit on where to go ahead and watch your streaming media is the fact that you're going to get more people that are looking for easier, more convenient ways to watch all their streaming services. They're at 7 or 10 or whatever it is. According to that one study, they're all looking for one place to go and watch it in one spot. So they're going to want the cable experience of being able to have everything in one spot with the remote. So new research shows growth potential for streaming players. Half of upcoming streaming device buyers will be first-time owners, according to a new report from Interpret. And so in the study from Interpret, they said that it found half of consumers who plan to purchase a smart TV or a streaming media player within the next 3 months will be first-time buyers. So everybody wants to be able to go and get everything access to one place because you got to have that universal remote type of feel. That's what you got to have. The remainder is existing owners who replacing their streaming device, upgrading to a newer version, or switching to a new brand. According to Interpret's streaming devices, platforms, brands, and consumers 2020 report, 10% of consumers plan to buy a smart TV, and a similar number plan a streaming media player purchase within the next quarter. Samsung and Video owners are the least likely to replace their smart TV, and Roku owners are the least likely to want to replace their streaming media player. In the survey, 18% of these owners are Roku owners, 17% Samsung, 18% Vizio. They plan to replace their device within the next 3 months. So you see where the money's coming from, and you're seeing the pattern, the behavior of your media consumers and how they are consuming their content. That's what's going on with everything as well. It's a fascinating thing to go through altogether when you look at the whole thing that's going on. So there are some things that are being made, moves that are being done, as we said, where some of the streaming services are working aggressively on content. We know they're all spending tens of millions of dollars on content. Amazon buying MGM's entire library and their future, and just the studio in general. Now Universal movies are going to be moving to Peacock on a quicker timeline, according to a new story, that Universal Pictures will now send new movies exclusive to the company's Peacock streaming services no later than 4 months after they debut in theaters. So Universal is going to work with their parent company, Comcast, and put Peacock up in front of the map as their exclusive streaming video home after the fact. Universal movies currently go to AT&T's HBO TV channel and HBO Max 6 months after they hit cinemas, but then they're going to make the change around in 2022. So films from Universal, Animation Studios, DreamWorks Animation, Illumination, Focus Features will all be moved to Peacock. And some of the titles that will be moving around will be the Jurassic World Dominion series, a new movie from Get Out filmmaker Jordan Peele, fresh installments from Minions and Puss in Boots, and those franchises coming in. And the deal right now with Universal and Peacock covers what the industry calls the pay one window, the time when movies have left theaters, play on streaming services or cable channels. That period typically lasts 18 months. So now that window is going to be carved into 3 segments. New movies will go to Peacock for the first and last 4 months of the 18-month period. For the 10-month period in between, Universal will then be able to license the movies to other distributors. And Universal Pictures will now be making original films specifically for Peacock. So all these companies are using the resources to figure out what they're going to do with things. They're all trying to figure it out. And so eventually they're going to get it all put together. A couple other things I want to bring up that are just aside from the point, but that, now you know my point where everything comes from with the pattern of your audience and what they're going to be doing. It's important of what the content's going to be. It's going to be important to pay attention to what these broadcasters out there, these big corporate broadcasters, what are they going to do? How is it going to hurt the pockets of the consumers? Because it's just a boon right now that everybody can stream. They can find an easy way to stream everything through a streaming player. They're all engaging into it, and they're subscribing to the services. Some of them are new, adopting some new ones. Some of them might go away, and we're going to see what gets weeded out. But like we said, in these stories, there's going to be some consolidation. Another merger like a Warner Media and Discovery type of merger could happen to other companies and down the line in the near future. That could very well happen too. So me being the quintessential podcaster, being king of podcasts, would only be fair that I talk about a particular podcast story. A few weeks ago, I talked about here, and I'm on one of my podcasting series about Netflix now getting more embedded into the podcast business. Well, they have hired their first head of podcasts, former Apple and NPR executive Najeri Eaton. And she was head of content of Apple Podcasts, who now is going to lead the streaming giant's marketing division. Now, Netflix has produced several podcasts, which, like Apple's original podcasts, have been promo companions for its original TV series. So Netflix has produced podcasts for Martin Scorsese's film The Irishman, TV shows including The Crown, The Witcher, Shadow and Bone, and Stranger Things, and as well as Netflix's A Daily Joke, a short-form podcast is literally a joke or comedy bit each day. And before being at Apple, she worked at NPR for 4 years, most recently as senior manager of program and acquisitions. At NPR, she sourced new talent, partnerships, and content, including Believed, which is a Peabody Award winner, White Lies, a Pulitzer Prize finalist, and No Compromise, an investigative podcast about gun rights activists, which won the Pulitzer 2021 for audio reporting. So, you obviously bring somebody that brings a whole lot of background. And for Netflix and the big corporate podcasters, yeah, it makes sense that they're going to be doing their content as it is right now with somebody that's got some real sound experience with Apple and NPR and create that big type of podcast, which is not a fan podcast or not a grassroots podcast like the ones that I do. Even though mine, I think I do pretty well making them very professional and putting them together and then, putting it out there to go up against the big boys with a lot bigger budgets and a lot more things that are going on, which is fine. But to see the podcast market being so pushed, we've talked about how podcasting now, there's so many big players coming into podcasting right now and how much money is being added to it. I mean, you're seeing stars, podcast stars getting, hundreds of millions of dollars following along the lines of Joe Rogan and really making some big money. And the celebrities that are making up to $3 million per project. Like, that's just huge. But, when it comes to podcasting, when it comes to audio, the one thing I haven't heard much about, and I really haven't talked much about, is Clubhouse because, I haven't mentioned much about Clubhouse in a while. But when I really look at it, it feels like it's very good for some people that want to go ahead and have the feel of Clubhouse where it's kind of like, if you're going to a conference, like you're going to a Comic-Con or you're going to a major business-to-business conference, you go and it just feels like there's, it's just what it is. Story of Entrepreneur actually brings up a story about how one person talking about how he was on Clubhouse for 3 months and what he learned. And he says, first of all, why you should be there. You have the option of speaking up or simply sitting back and listening to the content. So depending on your circumstances, the option of speaking up or sitting back and listening. Depending on your circumstances, you can go with what works for you at the moment. If you're looking for exposure with a little prep, that's where you use Clubhouse. No need to worry about hair or makeup or getting the light just right. All you need to be aware of is your surroundings to ensure you're not getting too much background noise or echo. So if you're trying to get on there, there's one thing. Here's pros and cons. If you're looking to collect with like-minded people, there's no better place than Clubhouse. While it's hot, still much in its infancy, you can expect many new functions to be added in the future. Some cons is, yes, the content goes for way too damn long. You could join a room at 10 p.m., you think you're on there for 30 minutes, next thing you know, it's 2 a.m. While it's possible to record your Clubhouse sessions with a little money and effort, it's a bit of a pain. For most people, once the session's gone, it's gone. Unless you have the right equipment, you're limited to the mic on your phone, which is surprisingly good. It's no pro mic. But here's what he also says, what Clubhouse isn't in it, is which is interesting. So it is the perfect tool, he says, for the social environment in which we find ourselves. You may find yourself sharing the stage with entrepreneurs such as Jay Abraham, Russell Brunson, Billie Jean, and Ty Lopp on the platform. A great way to hone your speaking in front of an audience, albeit virtually, and get your message out there. Unlike other social platforms, Clubhouse is one you can create material for free in your free time and still be posted when needed. To make the most out of it, you'll want to speak, and that means airtime. After talking to entrepreneurs about their experience on Clubhouse, they seem torn between loving it and finding it a massive waste of time. And that's true. That's where I come from with that. It's just that's why podcasting is still understood. The way you can be able to have content on demand, people want it that way. And to do something where you're doing Clubhouse, as opposed to some people that are doing the Twitch live streaming style, or you were watching a live stream on YouTube, it's one thing that's different because that's event programming in some cases. But to do it like you do here, it does feel like a conference circuit. And that's okay. Going to like a trade show feel, for some people that might work out, but they are too long. There's not much moderation during some of this content. It just kind of sits out there and it's a little too much to deal with. That's where I feel with that. Now, one of the stories I want to bring up, Media Post actually brought up a really interesting study. Because of our fact that we're on social media so much, your Clubhouse, I bet you, is contributing to it. People spend nearly 2.5 hours daily on social media. About 2 hours, 25 minutes each day. It's according to the research from We Are Social and Hootsuite. And Americans spend less than 18 minutes less than the global average, by the way. The total time spent on social media is about the same as 2019, despite the pandemic. Facebook remains the world's most used social platform in the U.S. and globally, followed by YouTube and WhatsApp. Facebook-owned platforms account for 4 of the top 5 most used global platforms socially. There are now 4.2 billion social media users around the world, representing year-on-year growth of more than 13% and representing 490 million new users. The number of social media users is now equivalent to more than 53%, more than half of the world's total population. And the U.S. counts 299 million internet users, 240 million social media users. Of a country that's, over 350 million people? It's incredible. Females, regardless of age, spend more time on social media than men. Women age 45 to 54 spend 2 hours and 1 minute per day. Male counterparts, an hour, 47 minutes. Well, I'm way more than that. Top reasons for using social media are staying up to date with news and events, 37%. Finding funny content and entertainment, 35%. Filling up spare time, 34%. Staying in touch with friends and family, 34%. Sharing videos and photos with others, 28%. And nearly half visit social media sites for brand research. And they also notice that overall time spent online increased for people that are just on the internet in general. The average internet user now spends almost 7 hours a day using the internet across all devices. 7 hours, 11 minutes in the U.S. And if you want to look at that Media Post article, there's a link to the report you can go to as well. That's quite interesting. There's a lot to be said about all that. So there we go. So another interesting episode here of the Broadcasters Podcast. I enjoy it myself. I hope you do as well. And when we come back next week, we'll keep it up. There will be something else that will come down the line that will keep me interested, and it'll give me another show prepped and ready to go for next week. And I hope you like some of these shows that I've been doing here without the interviews, where, I mean, I've been noticing that people feel pretty good about me doing the show as a solo rant, just like I do with all my other content. So it's kind of working that way and keeps it pretty easy for me, even though I do like doing the interviews. But right now, I'm just trying to think about what subjects, if I want to go back into any interviews, what would I talk about with some of these guests? If, you know, and I still do interviews. I just do them for the Cannabis Radio Network for Blunt Business. But right now, I mean, I haven't had anything that brought myself to mind. Like, I'm not getting a lot of PR people coming left and right offering me guests. But if I put out a search, I can get a bunch of guests who can come on right away. But I want to have something good to talk about. And at the moment, I don't have any subjects I really want to bring up at the moment that really stand out to me that I think would be really important to talk about, that I would have a lot to ask at the moment. Because there is a plateau. Well, not a plateau. There's a bit of a ceiling as the kind of guest I would really like to bring on, some big media executives or some people in radio that have been around, because some people want to protect their turf. And that's okay. I understand that. There's not a lot of people that are going to be out there that are going to be very interested in really opening up and being very critical or being very open to what their feelings are on the industry itself. It is tough to do that. It's tough to get some guests to kind of really open up that way. But I'll keep that in mind. If I decide to go back to interviews, I might. But at the moment, I'm getting pretty good without it. And that's okay. It's not like I didn't like doing interviews, but I think the audience, the listeners here to this program, all of you wonderful listeners, I think you've been liking, you know, the different subjects we talk about every week on this show and having more time to talk about the headlines that are out there. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there for all of you this week. Thank you for listening in. Subscribe to the show. The website's broadcasterspodcast.com. So if you need any of the stories that I talked about here on the show, you can find them all there. Click on them. Check them out for yourselves. Until next week, come back for another Broadcasters Podcast. And remember that content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast. Find all the links to subscribe to the show by going to broadcasterspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, the Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at wrestlingisreal.com.